The airlock door paired open, and the 5 figures stepped aboard the dead ship. Kochanski inhaled the heavy musk as the rash of torch beams swirled around the decom chamber. Walking alongside Crichton, she signalled with her torch and started wading through the knee-deep mix of oil and water that covered the floor. If Christine Kochanski's parents had still been alive, they would not have approved of the company she was presently keeping. They had not sent their eldest, most cherished and talented daughter to the finest schools money could buy so she could knock about the universe with people like this. They had not paid for piano lessons from the age of 4, or Esperanto classes from the age of 6. They had not paid for jiu-jitsu training at 12, or flying lessons and extra classes in quantum mechanics at 16. In fact, they had not done any of these things which had finally contributed to her winning a place at the European Space Academy, where she graduated with honours as Flight Coordinator First Class, so that she could wind up in the far reaches of deep space with a bunch of degenerate half-wits and hardly any clean knickers. And her father, her poor long-dead father, would have had more seizures than a ward of epileptics if he had ever clapped eyes on the object of her affections. The man whose picture presently hung around her neck in a silver locket he'd given her to celebrate the anniversary of the first week they'd been dating. The silver locket that always seemed to leave a purple tide mark around her neck that was next to impossible to wash off without medicinal alcohol. Lister waded to her side. "Hey, hey," she returned their ritual greeting. "Want to show me some more of your scars?" She looked at Lister's Grand Canyon grin. "So, know who I am now?" "Hey, I was still groggy, and hell, there you were, suddenly naked. It didn't seem right to ask you for your driver's license." "So when did you remember?" "Well, before it was over, let me tell you." "When exactly?" "When?" "Yes, when?" Lister paused and looked at her seriously. "Look, I remember who you are, Kublowski, okay? Relax, would you?" Kochanski kicked out with her foot and sent a torrent of water over Lister's snigger-hunched features. Suddenly, the cat's voice cut in. "What's this?" His torch pointed to a matted fair island, about a foot across, floating on the water. He hauled it out of the water and flipped it round to look at it. He stared into familiar brown eyes, and his scream slammed around the chamber like a berserk squash ball. It was a head. The head of a humanoid who was identical to the cat. Lister waded across to where the cat was standing, his heart beating out a karaoke on his ribs. "You okay?" "For a dude who's just picked his own head out of a swamp, I'm doing great," falsettoed the cat. Crichton ran his psi scan over the dismembered skull. Kochanski waded across. "Well?" "It says, organism incomplete." "What a truly remarkable machine," said Rimmer. "And it knows all that from just seeing a dismembered head. Absolutely incredible."
"Give it another minute, sir."
Lister leaned in. "Well, what does it think?" "It thinks we should get the hell out of here in case the headless look is in fashion around here," said the cat.
"Here it comes now."
Crichton read the printout.
"Head decapitated by laser. Victim possesses same DNA structure as crew member known as Cat. Advice: vacate ship immediately. Extreme danger."
"Right, let's go," said Rimmer.
"Maybe there are survivors," said Kochanski. "We can't go until we've carried out a thorough search of the ship."
"Says who?"
Rimmer laughed softly. "Says a flight coordinator in the Starfleet and your superior officer." There was a long pause. Rimmer returned a reluctant salute. "No, ma'am." The cat's laugh echoed down the chamber.
"This bitch is good!" Lister stood in front of the closed hatchway and jabbed the door release button repeatedly. No electrics. Crichton adjusted the medical bag under his arm.
"Suggest we go back to Starbug and return with the halogens and the mobile generator."
Lister shrugged. "I'm going to stick around here. Take a look round." Kochanski nodded. Mr. Rimmer, stay with him.
Me? Why can't I come back with you guys?
You're a hologram. You can't help with the MG or the lamps. It's just a waste of your battery.
But I could still come back and help advise how best the lamp should be carried, what sort of grip to use.
Stay here.
You don't like me, do you? It's because I'm dead, isn't it? You living people hate us deadies.
Rimmer?
Just don't be long.
A hologram he might be, but now he had a three-dimensional solidogram body that Crichton had ransacked from a derelict while the crew was in deep sleep. He intended to keep it in one piece. It was his proudest possession, his hard light drive, and he wasn't going to risk it for anyone. For years he'd been soft-light, unable to touch or interact properly because he lacked that all-important third dimension. But now, thanks to Crichton, it was different. His mind flicked back to the days following the mechanoid's discovery of the science on board the Lagos, a lost scout ship they'd come across, frozen into the tundra of an Arctic moon. In terms of technology, the ship was generations beyond anything they'd seen before. They even had yogurt cartons that were easy to open. After several failed attempts, Rimmer's personality was successfully siphoned into a new bee housing with a hard light capability. It was like taking delivery of his first car all over again. The joy, the glory, the unbridled ecstasy. While the others returned to deep sleep, Rimmer strutted around Starbug like a male model from a mail-order cardigan catalogue. For weeks, no mirror was safe, and no sunbed could be passed without topping up his quiz show host tan. But gradually the novelty wore off, and after a while he found it difficult to remember what being 2D was like. Dead he still was, but now, in some respects at least, he was whole again. Lister sighed. For the last 10 minutes he'd waded up and down the decom chamber and had found nothing of interest. Now he was beginning to wish he'd gone back with the others. Just for the hell of it, he struck the door release button with his index finger. Slowly, the door creaked open and revealed the interior of the ship. I thought the electrics were down. Lister peered into the ship through the open hatchway. I'm going to take a look around, okay?
In there? By yourself? Haven't you ever seen a schlock horror movie? That's what they always do. Split up, then wander about in the dark by themselves, usually walking backwards. You're making the same mistake the girl in the tight top always makes.
Lister grinned and walked backwards over the floor arch and stepped into the ship proper. If you need me, just scream. He flicked on a second torch, clicked the safety catch off his bazookoid, and walked cautiously into the gloom. For 10 minutes, he searched the control decks and found nothing. Then he bounded softly up the stairs that led to the obs deck. 4 steps in, he heard a noise. A kind of low, wet, slurping sound that sounded like an animal feeding. It came from the far end of the cabin, behind a bank of bio-units that came out of the wall at right angles. There'd been flooding up here as well. He could feel the wetness beneath his feet. 1 match, and this whole craft would go up in seconds. He stooped to check if it was the same oil and water mix as the decom chamber. His finger drew a line on the floor, and he tasted it. This time it wasn't oil and water. This time, it was blood. From his left, a shadow angled towards him at great speed. He turned, lost his balance, and fell headlong into a bank of hard discs before he scrabbled to his feet and nailed the shape with a single squeeze of his bazookoid. The rat splattered into the wall with a single squish. Rimmer called from the decom chamber, "What is it?" "Just a rat, it's okay." As he finished speaking, he saw the first body, slumped in a chair. The body didn't have a head. Lister looked down at the corpse wearing a pink wool Barathea jacket edged in patent leather that was identical to the one the cat possessed. A little, involuntary yelp leaked out of Lister's mouth. Next, he found Rimmer. His light beard had been shot in two. After Rimmer, he found Crichton. His right arm was missing and his head had been lasered from his body with a cheap cigar in his mouth. He took the cigar from between Crichton's lips and gently closed his eyes. "You found anything, Listy?" Rimmer called. "No, not yet. Everything's fine, man." For the next 20 minutes, Lister searched the entire ship. The obs deck, the cockpit, the galley, the midsection, and finally the cargo bays. He went at speed, hoping to find his own body before the others returned so he could figure out what had happened and what he was going to tell them. To Lister, it looked like maybe they'd wandered into a time loop. Halfway through the cargo bays, he found Chris. He'd picked up a trail of blood as he wandered through the cargo bays. He'd followed it down the flight of stairs and through the sleeping quarters. Several times he lost it, as presumably she'd successfully stemmed the flow, but he picked it up again in the food hall as he was passing a row of empty freeze-dried fruit pallets. Now the flow was heavier. She wasn't able to walk anymore. She was on all fours, dragging herself, slowly and painfully across the cargo bay. Lister continued to follow the trail as it wended its way round the bay and down the steps which led to the spare deep sleep units on level 2. Then he saw her. Another Christine Kachansky. She was in deep sleep, and she wasn't dead. Lister squeaked clean the plexiglass covering and peered in at Kachansky's doppelganger. Somehow, she'd managed to crawl into one of the units and engage the mechanism to freeze herself. That's why all the electrics were down. The ship's drive computer had shut off all non-essentials to concentrate on this. He peered at the bio-readouts on the fascia and wondered what to do. The old stasis mechanism on Starbug didn't freeze time completely. It just slowed it down by 95%. Chris was still dying in there, just dying very slowly. He took out his transmitter and flicked it on. Exhaustion draped itself over Lister like a rain-sodden coat as he lined up the stretcher outside the deep sleep unit, and Kachansky pressed the deactivate code. For the past 4 hours, they'd made the required preparations, sterilizing the obs deck and converting it into a temporary operating theatre. Now, it was time. The sleep unit's door swished open, and Lister and Crichton gingerly lifted the dying Kachansky's body onto the stretcher and gently wheeled it towards the midsection. As they passed through a hatchway leading to the cargo bay, she regained consciousness. She stared up into a face identical to her own, and a railway line of incomprehension wrinkled across her brow. Kachansky held her hand. "Who are you?" said the dying girl. Kachansky stroked the back of her hand. "It's hard to say, without knowing who you are." "Lister? Where's Lister?" "We couldn't find him," said Kachansky. "They took him." "Who took him?" "Heard screams, his voice shouting. Went to look. Attacked from behind. Managed to..." She wasn't able to finish the sentence. "You managed to get to a deep sleep unit?" She nodded. "Must have thought I was dead." "Where did they take him?" Crichton leaned in. "Ma'am, please, no more questions." The girl took hold of Lister's shirt and pulled him towards her. "Promise me you'll find him. He'll know who did this." A single note piped around the room as the medicomputer suddenly started to flatline. Crichton opened his medicrate and hauled out the heart pads. Quickly he connected them to the MG, then placed the pads on the girl's chest and pressed the release mechanism. A wave of electricity hurtled into her, making her body arc and fall. Still, the medicomputer maintained its sullen monotone. A second time, Crichton released the pads. A second time, she writhed and bucked as the volts raged into her body. A second time, she fell motionless. The third time, The monotone was replaced with a heartbeat. "This is too risky. Get her back into deep sleep."
"What about the operation?"
"Later, when we're better prepared."
Lister took a slurp of coffee.
"I reckon we've wandered into some kind of parallel reality. We must have made an error with the navicalcs when we were traversing the Omnizone. We're in the wrong dimension."
"A dimension where we all get wiped out." Kochanski peered into the dead navicomp. "Apart from Lister."
She wiped a coating of dust from the screen.
"He's out there somewhere, with whoever did this."
Lister recognised the tight, determined smile. "Chris, we've got to get back to our own reality. Did I utter a single word? Right now in our universe, the human race no longer exists."
"Since when have you been so responsible? You've never worried about the future in your life," replied Kochanski.
Crichton walked in through the hatchway, his head slumped disconsolately on his chest. "What's happened?"
"I'm afraid Miss Kochanski died a few minutes ago."
Lister sat on a chair in his other self's quarters and scanned the room. His other self clearly didn't share these quarters with Kochanski. There was a rough bachelor feel to the whole room. Skulls of all shapes and sizes, some ashtrays, some ornaments, some acting as storage jars, littered the room. He opened the metal locker that doubled as a wardrobe. A pile of magazines slithered out from a top shelf, hitting him on the head and fanning out over the floor. He stooped and picked one up. They were all different issues of the same title, something called Gore. Lister idly flicked through the pages. Murder, Nazis, Satan. Lister wished he hadn't found them. So, his other self had a morbid fascination with the lurid. Wasn't a big deal, but he'd rather not have known. He collected the magazines together and stacked them neatly back in the wardrobe. Crichton stood behind him.
"Don't you feel you have an obligation to your other self, sir? I mean, to help him?"
"Chris has sent you, has she?"
"Engage lie mode," said Crichton. "No, sir."
"We don't belong here, Crichty. This isn't our Barney. Plus, if he isn't dead, which, let's face it, he probably is, I don't want to be the one to tell him he's lost everything. I mean, for his sake, I hope he is dead."
"There's an asteroid only 2 days from here, Blerius 15. According to the info link, it supports a substantial population."
"What kind of population?"
"Pig-based gelfs, mostly. Some kind of drone species, designed for manual labour. They formed a society of no mean sophistication, and from what I can ascertain, they're not unfriendly. They might be able to shed some light on what happened here."
Lister nodded, not listening. Instead, he paused at one of the photographs. 2 figures were sitting in bed, semi-hysterical. Their 4 pinprick eyes peeked out of an avalanche of crazy foam that covered them both. Grinning, they posed arm in arm. He studied it hard. Kochanski and his other self. For the first time, Lister felt a connection. The ship was identical, the furnishings were similar, and yet until now, until he'd seen this picture, he'd felt strangely alienated from his other self in a way he couldn't articulate. But this picture changed everything. A smile tobogganed across his face. "Okay." He looked up from the photograph. "Let's find the son of a bitch and bring him home." The night shift passed without event. The Starbug tacked its way through the asteroid belt. The cat leaned in from the cockpit. "I hate to go all technical on you, but all hands on deck! Swirly thing alert!" "Where?" said Rimmer, taking his position. "It's not on the radar yet, but I can smell it." "Nothing here."
"Nor on the long-range scan," said Crichton. "Sir, is it possible that you could have made a missmelling?"
"Listen, butterpat head, my nostril hairs are vibrating faster than the springs on a Spaniard's honeymoon bed. I'm telling you, there's something out there."
"OK, don't get your double helix in a straight. No one's questioning your nasal integrity."
Kochanski bounded down the steps from the obs room and into the cockpit.
"There's something on the Hubble."
"Go to blue alert," said Rimmer in a clipped tone. What for? Asked Lister. There's no one to alert. We're all here. May I remind you of Space Corps Directive 34124?
34124?
Asked Crichton.
No officer with false teeth should attempt oral sex in zero gravity.
I want to go to Blue Alert. Okay, Lister soothed. He clicked a single switch, and a small, sad sign with Blue Alert lit up over the rear fascia. Rimmer's head dipped in triumph. At last, a bit of professionalism. Wait, I have something, Kachansky said. Punch up long range.
What is it?
Kachansky studied a blare of readouts. At this range, it's impossible to say.
Rimmer swiveled round to face Crichton.
Step up to red alert.
Are you absolutely sure, sir? It will mean changing the bulb.
Range 15,000 G-gooks and closing, guys.
Suggest evasive action, sir.
You got it, said the cat. Starbug reared under the impact of the fuel injection and screamed off, tilting on its port side. The ship banked one way and then the other as the green streak tracked them effortlessly. It was some kind of heat seeker. They couldn't outrun it. That's it, said the cat. We're better than seersucker. Rimmer's head arched up from the monitor. Suggestions?
Sir, may I recommend I load myself into the reverse thrust tube and you can use my body as decoy fodder. Of course, this would leave me splattered around deep space and unable to complete today's laundry, for which I apologise in advance.
Crichton, you're hysterical. Now stop your blathering and get in the damn tube. Lister held up a hand. Don't move, Crichton. You're going nowhere. I'm not doing me own smegging ironing. Kachansky said, We'll have to reason with it. Open communication channels. She's right, said Rimmer. Broadcast on all known frequencies, in all known languages, including Welsh. Lister's fingers spun across the console as he opened the rusting comm channel. Rimmer cleared his throat, leaned in, and began broadcasting. This is Arnold J. Rimmer of the Jupiter Mining Corporation transport vehicle Starbug. Now hear this, and hear it good, because it's only coming once. He wiped his dry lips and then began. We surrender, totally and without condition. Thank you for listening. Message ends. Oh, additional. Sorry for taking up your time. Thank you so much. Sorry. Bye. Sorry. The green dart of light hit Starbug with a wet slurp, then started to wrap its glutinous matrix around the craft until the vessel was held in a pulsing bubble. What the hell is this? Some kind of suction beam, replied Kachansky. We're being dragged down. Crichton looked up.
Sirs, I've located the beam's source. It's coming from Blerius 15.
The green cirrus cloud carried Starbug through the asteroid's atmosphere and down towards a city ringed by vast golden-headed mushroom towers, before being set down in an aeropad in the south of the city. Suddenly, a face emerged out of a storm of white noise on the main monitor. It was a species of Gelth, with pig-like pink flesh, a low Neanderthal brow, and large fleshy lips.
My name is Likiel. I am a potent and a member of the Blerian High Council. You have flown across Bleria's airspace without authorization. As laid down by the Forum of Justice on Arangu 12, you must now submit to our judiciary. You will vacate your vessel within the next 30 seconds. If you resist, the R bubble will increase your cabin temperature to 75 degrees centigrade. We await your answer.
The group trudged down the disembarkation ramp. The Blerians bound them with a thick rope made out of creepers, bundled them into the back of an open-top transporter, and headed into the city. Everything about the place was basic. The buildings held together by clay and mud, the potholed roadways, even the simple one-piece grey cotton robes that all the Blerians seemed to wear. The only signs of culture were the hugely elaborate mushroom towers that arched over the city, like giant sentries. Lister sat in the back, exchanging shrugs with the others, as the transporter hooted its way through a route lined with open markets selling fruit and carpets. The sound came without warning, from somewhere above. Lister peered up to see what it was. On one of the balconies that ring the mushroom towers, a figure pulled on a massive black bell. The sound soon thickened as bells in towers all over the city started to join in too. "Look!" Rimmer pointed to the nearest tower, as two figures joined the bell ringer and started to cast rice seeds off the precipice. "What's all this about?" The transporter jolted to a halt. The guards grabbed a number of black hoods from under the seat and slipped them over the crew's heads and noosed them tight. Lister grabbed the piece of the hood in his teeth. Bit by bit, bite by bite, he reeled the cloth into his mouth, all the time stretching the material across his face. Now he was able to make out dark silhouettes of running figures. He swallowed a little more, storing some of it under his upper gum, and peered out again. The shapes took form. The Gelfs appeared to be dividing into groups of two, one male, one female. Finally the bells stopped, and there was silence all over the city. Then a priest appeared on each of the mushroom towers and played a harp, while the entire population of Blerius 15 started to copulate. Lister gawped through his black hood. 60 seconds later, the entire population of Blerius 15 climaxed simultaneously, or pretended to, at least. Afterwards, they quickly dressed and went about their day. Soon Lister was shielding his eyes from the bright sunlight as a Blerian guard removed his black hood. Then the transporter started up and they continued their journey. The cell door opened, and 4 Blerian guards splayed out in a star formation. At the top of the formation was a Gelf they hadn't seen before. He wore an ornate facepiece, like an Aztec priest, and a silver robe bedecked with jewels that covered his entire body from neck to feet, all except for a circle of material which was cut out of the cloth and allowed his genital organs to hang out of his costume. This was the only part of him they could see.
"You have strayed into Blerius 15 airspace without permission. This is a most serious charge."
Lister began. "We made a navicalc error transversing the Omnizone, and—"
"You have 2 choices. Go before the Forum of Justice on Arangu 12 and protest your innocence, or pay the fine."
"And how much is that, precisely?" asked Rimmer, staring steadfastly at the top of the priest's head.
200 barrels of oil, or 5 bars of Gatu.
"Gatu?"
Or, if you wish, you can pay in sperm. 4 milliliters.
Lister shared a look with Kachansky. "We can pay in sperm?"
Correct.
4 milliliters? Half a teaspoonful?
That is so.
"May we ask what you do with this sperm?"
Our species was engineered to terraform an inhospitable solar system. An ability to reproduce wasn't deemed necessary.
"So you're all sterile?"
All apart from we potents.
"But the women are fertile, and that's why you have the towers with the bells and the call to copulate, to ensure you achieve maximum fertility." A grin shimmied across the cat's mouth. "Sperm is worth a fortune here, guy."
Come, you do not pretend that you have any. We can tell from your craft that you are not rich. You are not emo traders, merchants. Where would people such as yourselves possibly get sperm?
Lister looked at the cell floor sheepishly. "We have a secret store." "Right," said the cat, "which we keep in a special place."
Back on your ship?
Yeah, back on our ship, right.
I'll arrange for you to return to your craft."
Lister bowed. "One last thing. For the appropriate fee, would it be possible for us to spend some time here on Blerius 15? We need supplies.
After the fine is paid.
The news filtered quickly through the marketplace. Merchants with substantial amounts of sperm to spend were making their way through the market. They had bought bread and cheeses, oil and wine, and a number of musty old volumes outlining the history of the belt that Crichton insisted would come in useful. As they trooped through the market, Lister stopped at a stall that sold candles. He looked up to ask the price of the stallholder and stared straight into a pair of black eyes that dilated with fear. For a second, Lister didn't understand the look. The Gelf was afraid of him. No, more than afraid. Terrified. But how was that possible? They'd never met. Then he realised. He was staring into the eyes of someone who knew his other self. The stallholder ducked under the stall's thin cotton back cover and started to sprint across the marketplace. Lister pointed. He knows him! He knows my other self! The cat removed his yellow flannel jacket, folded it neatly in two, and held it out to Crichton, as if it were the Turin shroud. Guard it with your life, bud.
Sir, you can count on it.
If you get trapped in a burning building, promise me the jacket leaves first.
Sir, protecting this jacket is my new reason to live.
That's all I wanted to hear. The cat leapt over two Gelfs carrying a roll of carpet, sidestepped an overturned fruit stall, and flung himself at the figure. Lister ran up panting. How do you know me? The Gelf frowned, not understanding. How do you know me? You know I know you. What do you mean? Just answer the question. I gave you transport to Blerius 15. Your craft was irreparable. You were marooned. And then? We got picked up by the Federal Council. They knew I was an emo smuggler. I blamed you. And? They took you away for questioning. What about my crewmates? What happened to them? I don't know. If I wanted to find me, what would I do? Everything goes before the Forum of Justice on Orangu 12. Seek an audience with the regulator. Anything else? If you were smart, you'd send the mechanoid. Because? He's more lenient towards mechanicals. The Noid's more likely to get information. Lister's right fist arced through the air, and the stallholder collapsed into a box of plums. Thank you, he said politely. You've been most helpful.